Ethan never planned to end up on a desert island, but nothing about this year had gone the way he planned. He had left Vancouver with a heart full of frustration after a long breakup and a job that drained him more than it inspired him. He booked a small boat tour in the Pacific hoping the ocean breeze would clear his head. He expected a quiet trip and maybe a few peaceful days to forget everything waiting back home. Instead, a storm came from nowhere. The sky darkened so fast that even the captain looked confused. Waves rose like mountains and tossed the boat until everything felt upside down. Ethan remembered the sound of metal snapping, people shouting, the captain yelling something he could not understand, then water everywhere, cold and endless. When he opened his eyes, he found himself lying on warm sand with a deep ache in his chest. The ocean was calm now, as if pretending nothing had happened. He struggled to sit up and saw two women in the distance walking along the beach with torn clothes and sunburned skin. They didn't see him at first. They were arguing softly, their voices carried by the wind just enough for him to hear their fear hiding beneath the anger. One of them noticed him and froze. Her friend turned quickly and stared too. Ethan forced himself to stand even though his legs felt unstable. The two women came closer, not running, but moving with caution, the way people do when they don't know if someone is dangerous or badly hurt. The taller one spoke first. Her name was Claire, from Seattle. She had sharp blue eyes that looked like they had seen too much in the last 24 hours. The other woman introduced herself as Maya, a quiet photographer from Toronto who kept touching her backpack as if reassuring herself it still existed. None of them understood how they had survived or how far they were from the boat. They were strangers until hours ago. But fear and confusion made them fall into a sort of silent team. Ethan realized quickly that Claire was the bold one. She took control of the situation almost immediately, checking the tree line, examining the coastline, trying to find anything useful. Maya stayed close but carried a gentler energy, the kind that made Ethan feel calmer every time she looked at him. They decided to walk along the beach together, hoping to find more survivors or something that would explain what had happened. The sun kept sinking behind the horizon with heavy heat, and every step reminded Ethan how fragile all three of them were. When they didn't find anyone else, they accepted the truth slowly and painfully. They were alone. The island was beautiful, almost peaceful in a cruel way. Palm trees leaned toward the water, waves rolled softly, and the air smelled like fruit and salt. But isolation made everything feel sharper and heavier. They worked together to build a temporary shelter using broken pieces of the boat that had washed up. On the shore, Claire was the one who dragged the heavy metal pieces while Ethan gathered branches and Maya tied everything together with strips of clothing she cut from her torn jeans. By the time night fell, they had a small space covered enough to protect them from wind and any animals that might roam around. They sat near a fire Ethan managed to spark using stones and dried leaves. No one talked at first. They were too exhausted, too overwhelmed. All three stared at the flames like they were hypnotized by the simple comfort of warmth. Finally, Claire broke the silence. She explained that she had been traveling alone for the first time after leaving a long relationship that had ended with too many broken promises. She said she wanted an adventure, something that would shake her life awake again. This wasn't what she had hoped for, but there was a strange courage in her voice even as she admitted her fear. Maya talked next. Though her voice was soft and hesitant, every word felt honest. She said she had taken the boat to escape the pressure of life back home. Her photography studio was failing, her parents resented her choices, and she needed space to breathe. She hadn't expected that space to end with being swallowed by the ocean and spat onto an island. Ethan explained his story too. Not the whole thing, but enough that they understood he was healing from his own heartbreak and exhaustion. Something shifted between them. The fire softened the shadows on their faces, and in that glow Ethan saw more than fear. He saw strength in Claire, a stubborn bravery that made him want to follow her anywhere. And in Maya he saw a quiet softness that felt like a safe place to rest. Claire noticed him watching Maya and smirked in a way that felt teasing but warm. Maya noticed too and looked away with a shy smile that traveled through Ethan like a spark he didn't ask for. For a moment he forgot about the wreckage, the fear, the uncertainty. What he felt was simple and human, the sudden warmth of connection in a place that should have offered none. But survival didn't allow romance to bloom freely. They had to find food, water, and build a stronger shelter before anything else. Claire insisted they explore deeper into the island the next morning. Her confidence hid something that Ethan noticed only in brief moments when she thought no one was looking. A quiet fear, a tremor in her breath. Maya stayed close to him as they walked. Her gentle presence made the world feel less sharp. Sometimes their arms brushed and she would look away quickly, cheeks warming, as if she didn't want Claire to see the way her heart reacted. As they moved through the trees, Ethan felt something strange, a tension he didn't understand yet. The two women weren't friends before the wreck, but there was history in the way they looked at each other. Something unsaid, something buried but alive. It showed in the way Claire sometimes softened her tone with Maya, and how Maya glanced at Claire as if expecting her approval without admitting it. When they reached the center of the island, they discovered a shallow freshwater stream running between rocks and tall grass. The relief hit all three of them at once. Claire dropped to her knees and cupped water into her hands while Maya laughed in disbelief. Ethan felt hope return to his chest for the first time since the storm. But hope transformed quickly into something more complicated when Maya slipped and Ethan caught her by the waist. Their eyes met and neither of them looked away. Maya's breath hitched softly, and for a second the world felt painfully quiet. Claire saw them and her expression changed, not with anger but with something deeper, something like disappointment mixed with worry. Ethan didn't understand it yet, but the air between the three of them shifted just a little, enough to create a silent imbalance. They spent the day gathering fruits, studying the island's layout, and marking safe paths. The more they worked together, the more their connection grew. Claire trusted Ethan with tasks she wouldn't assign to someone she doubted. Maya stayed close and shared her thoughts with him in soft whispers when Claire walked ahead. As night fell again, they sat around the fire and listened to the ocean. Maya leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder for just a moment before pulling away with flushed cheeks. Claire watched them with an expression Ethan could not read. Something in her eyes looked like longing and sadness woven together. He didn't know yet what she was hiding. He didn't know the truth that would soon break the fragile balance forming between them. All he knew was that the island felt less lonely than it had the day before, and more dangerous in a way he couldn't explain. Something was coming. He could feel it in the quiet between their breaths, in the unspoken tension that kept growing with every glance. Every moment on that island was pulling the three of them toward a secret none of them were ready to face, and the truth would hit harder than the storm that brought them here, leaving Ethan caught between two women who were connected in a way he never expected. Ethan woke the next morning to the sound of waves and the soft rustling of palm leaves. But something in the air felt different. Claire was already outside the shelter, pacing along the sand like she had not slept at all. Maya sat near the dying fire, hugging her knees, lost in thought. The moment Ethan stepped out, both of them looked at him as if waiting for him to choose a side he didn't know he was part of yet. He tried to shake off the tension and suggested they continue exploring the north side of the island. Claire agreed too quickly and Maya nodded silently. As they walked through the trees, the sky turned a bright blue that should have felt peaceful but instead made everything feel exposed and sharp. The path became narrow and the ground uneven, and Maya reached for Ethan's arm more than once to steady herself. Every time she touched him, her eyes softened with something warm and uncertain. Claire noticed each moment and walked faster ahead as if trying to outrun her own thoughts. When they reached a rocky cliff overlooking the water, Claire stopped and stared at the horizon in silence. Ethan joined her and asked if she was all right. But her answer was half a smile and a quiet "I'm fine" that felt too broken to believe. Maya sat on a rock below them taking photos with the one camera she had saved, even though it barely worked now. Ethan watched her gently brush sand from the lens and felt another wave of that quiet tenderness she carried. Something that made the island feel less cruel for a heartbeat. Claire saw him watching Maya and something inside her cracked. She climbed down to the lower rocks and told them she needed to check the tide pools for food. Ethan followed, but Maya stayed back to photograph the glimmering water. Claire moved with sharp focus as she searched for anything edible, but Ethan could tell she wasn't really paying attention to the pools. Finally she spoke in a low voice, asking Ethan if he trusted Maya. The question felt strange. He said yes, of course, and Claire nodded slowly like she expected that. Then she said there were things Ethan didn't know yet, things Maya hadn't shared, things that might change everything. Before he could ask what she meant, Maya slipped on the rocks above and screamed as she tumbled down toward them. Ethan ran to her and caught her before she hit the jagged stone. She clung to him, shaking and embarrassed, saying she had been too focused on the camera and lost her balance. Claire knelt beside them, her hands trembling as she checked Maya for cuts. And for a moment both women looked at each other with something deeper than fear. Something Ethan couldn't understand but felt in the air like electricity. They helped Maya back to the shelter and made her rest even though she insisted she was fine. That night the fire burned low as the three sat together. In uneasy silence, Maya leaned against Ethan again, but this time Claire stood and walked away, pretending she needed more dry wood even though the fire didn't need it. When she returned, her eyes were red as if she had wiped away tears quickly. Ethan realized then that the tension wasn't about him. There was history between Claire and Maya, something painful and incomplete. The next morning Maya insisted she could walk, and wanted to explore the southern side of the island where she thought she saw abandoned structures from a distance. Ethan and Claire followed her even though Ethan worried she was still weak. The island changed as they moved south. The trees grew dense and the air felt heavier, like memories lived in the soil. After a long walk they found a small clearing with a half-collapsed wooden hut and rusted metal pieces scattered around like the skeleton of an old camp. Maya stepped inside the broken hut and froze. Her face turned pale as she whispered that she recognized the place. Ethan and Claire exchanged confused looks but followed her inside. Maya touched the broken wall like it was a ghost, then slowly admitted she had been on this island before, years ago, during a photography project that went wrong and ended with one of her crew members injured. She had never told anyone about it, not even Claire. Ethan asked softly why she had kept it a secret. Maya said that the accident had been her fault, that she had ignored warnings and forced the team into dangerous conditions just to get the perfect shot. The guilt had eaten at her for years and she had promised herself she would never return here. Claire looked at her with a mixture of heartbreak and anger, saying Maya should have told her long ago. Ethan sensed the deeper meaning in her words, and then Maya whispered the truth he had felt but not understood. She and Claire had known each other before the boat trip. They had been close once, more than friends, almost something real, but Maya had pulled away after feeling like she didn't deserve anyone's love. Because of the guilt she carried, Claire had tried to stay by her side but Maya left without saying a word, leaving Claire hurt and confused. Ethan finally understood the sadness in Claire's eyes and the quiet distance in Maya's heart. The air around them grew heavy with everything unspoken. Claire turned away and said she needed space, walking deeper into the trees until her figure disappeared between the shadows. Maya collapsed onto the dusty floor of the hut crying softly into her hands. Ethan knelt beside her and pulled her into a gentle embrace. Not romantic, not longing, just human comfort. She told him she never meant to involve them in her past. She only wanted the boat trip to be a fresh start, a way to prove she wasn't the person she used to be. Ethan told her that everyone carried mistakes and that secrets didn't make her unworthy of kindness, but the truth still stung his chest because the connection he felt with both women now twisted into something complicated and fragile. They stayed in the hut until Maya calmed down, but when they decided to return to camp, Claire was nowhere in sight. Hours passed as they searched the forest calling her name. The shadows grew long and the forest filled with eerie sounds that made Maya cling to Ethan in fear. He tried to stay calm but panic grew in his stomach. They reached the beach again but Claire still hadn't returned, and Maya whispered with trembling lips that Claire always ran when she was hurt, that this time she might not come back at all. Ethan refused to accept that. But as night fell and the ocean wind grew cold, the truth pressed harder against him. They were stranded, exhausted, and now one of them was missing somewhere on the island with no light and no protection. Ethan stared into the dark tree line, feeling a chill rise through him. The island had already taken so much from all three of them, and now it felt like it was about to take something even more important. He didn't know how to protect Maya without finding Claire, and he didn't know how to find Claire when the jungle swallowed every sound. The fire crackled weakly beside them as Maya whispered Claire's name over and over like a prayer that kept breaking in her throat. Ethan stood up with determination burning in his chest. He told Maya he would search all night if he had to, because letting Claire disappear wasn't an option anymore. Not after everything he had learned. Not after everything they were becoming together on this lonely island. Maya grabbed his hand and begged him not to go alone. But Ethan stepped back into the darkness anyway, his heart pounding, his voice calling Claire's name into the wild night air as the island listened in silence. And somewhere deep inside the jungle something moved in response. Ethan moved through the dark forest calling Claire's name again and again while branches snapped beneath his feet and shadows stretched like living things around him. The moonlight slipped through the leaves in thin silver lines that barely lit the uneven path. Every sound made his pulse jump because he knew Claire was out here somewhere, hurt or scared or pushing herself too far the way she always did when emotion swallowed her whole. He climbed over fallen logs and pushed through thorny bushes until his arms burned. But he didn't care. All he could think about was the look on Claire's face before she disappeared. The hurt in her eyes that came from old wounds reopening and new ones forming. Hours passed and the air grew colder. Ethan kept moving even as exhaustion tugged at his legs. When he finally stopped to catch his breath, he heard something faint in the distance. A sharp cry followed by rustling leaves. He sprinted toward the sound and found Claire at the bottom of a small slope sitting against a tree with her ankle twisted and her hands shaking. She looked up with a mix of relief and anger, telling him she didn't need saving, but her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. Ethan knelt in front of her and saw the pain she was trying to hide. He didn't scold her or ask why she ran. He simply lifted her gently and helped her stand on one foot. Claire leaned on him reluctantly as they began the long walk back toward camp. Her breath was shaky and her body shivered from exhaustion. After a while she whispered in a broken voice that she couldn't face Maya because the past hurt too much. Ethan listened quietly as she admitted she had loved Maya once, deeply and honestly, and losing her without explanation had left a wound she never healed from. She said seeing Ethan and Maya grow close reminded her of everything she failed to protect. Ethan told her that Maya still cared for her more than she understood and that running only deepened the gap between them. Claire didn't respond, but her grip on his arm tightened like she wanted to believe him but didn't trust herself to hope. When they reached the edge of the forest, they saw the small glow of the fire still burning at camp. Maya was sitting beside it, hugging her knees with tears streaming down her face. The moment she saw Claire, she jumped up and ran toward them. Maya wrapped Claire in a trembling embrace and repeated, "I'm sorry," over and over. Claire tried to stay strong but finally broke down, crying into Maya's shoulder as Ethan stepped back to give them space. The island felt quiet for a moment, like even the wind paused to let the two women breathe again. When they finally calmed down, Maya helped Ethan support Claire back to the shelter. They sat together under the soft glow of the fire and listened to the waves roll against the shore. Claire apologized for running away and for being too afraid of her own feelings. Maya apologized for disappearing from Claire's life years ago and for carrying secrets that built walls instead of trust. Ethan watched them and felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness because he cared about both of them more than he expected, and now he was caught between their broken history and their uncertain future. They talked for a long time, sharing truths that had stayed buried too long. And as the night deepened, something new formed between them, not romantic, not perfect, but honest and raw. The next morning the island felt different, lighter somehow. Maybe it was the sunlight or the way the three of them moved together now with a quiet understanding that didn't exist before. They decided to build a stronger shelter farther inland, away from the wind and closer to the stream. The work brought them closer, and for the first time since the shipwreck they laughed together without forcing it. But even as they rebuilt their small life, Ethan felt a gentle ache inside him. He had feelings for both women in different ways. Claire with her fierce bravery and fragile heart, Maya with her gentle warmth and quiet courage. But he knew the story between them stretched back farther than anything he could compete with. And he didn't want to be the reason old wounds reopened or new ones formed. Days passed and their survival routine grew steady. They found new food sources, built a better fire pit, and created signals along the beach hoping someone would pass by. Maya began taking photos again using the weak but still functioning camera, capturing their daily struggles and small victories. Claire helped Ethan weave stronger walls for the shelter, sometimes bumping his shoulder with a playful smirk as if trying to rebuild not just the shelter but their own spirits. One afternoon Maya found Ethan sitting alone near the water, skipping stones across the surface. She sat beside him quietly and said she knew he was holding something inside. Ethan hesitated but finally admitted he cared for both her and Claire, but he didn't want to come between them. Maya smiled sadly and thanked him for being gentle with their hearts when he had every reason to focus only on survival. She told him that whatever happened next didn't need to be decided now because feelings on an island could shift like tides, but honesty mattered more than choosing sides. That evening Claire approached Ethan while Maya slept and told him that whatever he felt didn't scare her. What scared her was losing people again because she didn't know how to hold on to them without hurting herself in the process. Ethan told her he wasn't asking her to choose anything either. He just wanted them all to heal without running or hiding. Claire breathed out slowly as if letting go of a weight she carried for too long. The days blended together until one morning they heard a distant rumble of engines across the water. Ethan ran to the beach with Claire and Maya close behind him. A rescue boat grew larger on the horizon, each second pulling them closer to the life they once knew. The three of them stood side by side watching salvation arrive, but none of them felt the pure joy they expected, because the island had changed them. Their pain, their fears, their hidden truths, all of it had brought them together in a way none of them could forget. When the rescuers finally reached the shore and wrapped blankets around their shoulders, Ethan, Claire, and Maya shared one last long glance at the island that had broken them and rebuilt them at the same time. They boarded the boat knowing their lives would never return to what they were before. The ocean wind felt cold against their faces as the island shrank behind them, and Maya slipped her hand into Claire's. Claire squeezed back, and Ethan looked at them with a soft acceptance that didn't hurt the way he feared it would. The three of them didn't know what their story would become once they returned home, but they understood something important. The island didn't trap them, it revealed them, it forced them to face truths they had hidden for years, and now they carried those truths into the world beyond the waves. Ethan watched the horizon ahead and breathed deeply, ready for whatever came next, because for the first time in a long time he didn't feel alone. Not in fear, not in heartbreak, and not in hope, and somewhere deep inside he knew that surviving the island was only the beginning of the story they would share in ways none of them could predict.